If the first thing that you do in the morning, like what I'm doing right now, is thinking about the Declaration of Independence, you're not wrong. You're just more American than other people. Cheers to a beautiful morning reading about the basic structure and setup of the Declaration of Independence. The video that I made last night didn't work, so I'm waking up early to read to you now. Lesson we're going to get into is lesson 8. The lesson question is what basic ideas about government are in the Declaration of Independence. And it really wouldn't be a video without Smokely popping in. But if I'm honest, she is the Declaration of Independence. But she's not, she's a cat. All right, so the lesson purpose. One of the most important documents in American history is the Declaration of Independence. It summarizes the colonists' basic ideas about government. The Declaration lists the colonies' complaints against the British government. The Declaration also explains the reasons why the colonies decided to declare their independence from Great Britain. When you finish this lesson, you should be able to explain the main ideas that are in the Declaration of Independence. So, basic ideas of the Declaration, I would just write this. List the ideals of good government, colonies' complaints, reasons why the colonies decided to declare independence, and finally, declaring independence itself. The book is a little bit more explicit. The terms to understand include the word abolish, and this is a word that will pop up in US history a few times, abolishing slavery, abolishing the poll tax, things of that nature. Loyalists, natural law, patriots, self-evident, Tories, unalienable rights. Kitty, I am reading. Rude. Okay, why was the Declaration of Independence written? On June 7th, 1776, the Continental Congress called for the colonies to declare independence from Great Britain. The Congress had to inform the British and the world that the colonies were now free and independent states. The Congress wanted to be sure that the reasons for its actions were clear. So, a committee to draft the Declaration of Independence was quickly appointed. Might want to know these people. Members of the committee were Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Roger Sherman, Robert Livingston, and a young Virginian named Thomas Jefferson. I would write that in now, in your notes, the notes box. Do it. Jefferson was a man of many talents. He was a statesman, diplomat, author, architect, and scientist. He was a member of the Continental Congress during the Revolutionary War. Jefferson was a quiet, shy man, not known as a great speaker. Excuse me. He worked well in small groups and was an excellent writer. Like a lot of you. An excellent writer, working well in small groups. Not a very prolific speaker. The committee chose Jefferson to write the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson spent many days writing. He discussed the draft with other members of the committee. They suggested changes and Jefferson made the revisions. When the committee finished its work, they sent the document to Congress. On July 4th, 1776, the members of Congress passed the Declaration of Independence. This early morning reading is it's not great. I'm not warmed up. There we go. All right, here is how it's structured. Here's what we got. We've got ideals, arguments, complaints, and conclusions. We've got ideals of good government, the purposes of government, and you'll see some natural rights pop up in the beginning of the Declaration. The arguments, the Declaration gives the reasons why the colonists thought they were justified in breaking away from Great Britain. The document includes complaints, a list of complaints against the British king. The items on the list there are there to show how the British government violated the rights of the colonists. And that's where a lot of the research that you just did this week is going to show up. Finally, the conclusion. In the end, the Declaration states that the bond between Great Britain and the colonies is dissolved. It states that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. Henceforth, we have created the United States. What a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I'm sure my neighbors don't like me singing at 6 o'clock in the morning about the Declaration of Independence. That's their problem. Right, kidding. What principles of government does the Declaration of Independence include? The Declaration sets forth some of the most important ideals of our nation. The Declaration states that all men are created equal and that they all have certain basic rights. These are the rights to life, liberty, and just kidding, pursuit of happiness. That's an interesting switch there. Switch from property to the pursuit of happiness. Part of the Declaration is printed below. I'm only going to read this part simply because we're going to do something on Monday that you'll be reading it, marking it up. But the term self-evident, easy for anyone to see. Endowed means given. Their creator implies God is involved in some way, shape, or form. Unalienable rights. I wonder what that means. Something that's unalienable, rights that can't be taken away. I don't know. Maybe you were born with it. Natural rights. That among these are the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeesh. Instituted, established, deriving, receiving, consent, agreement, ends, destructive of these ends, that means purposes, abolish, overthrow. We'll get to that. What reasons does the Declaration give for independence? Jefferson used the ideas of the natural rights philosophy in this argument. The main points of the argument are listed below. Number one, the rights of the people are based on natural law. This means there is an unchanging set of laws that govern human relations. Natural law is a higher law than law made by man. The founders believed that natural law came from God. No constitution or government may violate the natural law. The only purpose of government is to protect the people's natural rights. If a government, point number two, if a government violates the natural law, the people have the right to change or abolish or put an end to that government and form a new one. Number three, an agreement, social contract, existed between the colonists and the king. The colonists consented to be governed by the king so long as he protected their rights to life, liberty, and their property. Just gotta check the time. I don't want to be late to school. No agreement existed between the colonists and Parliament. Therefore, Parliament had no right to govern the colonies or to tax them. And by agreement, so it's implied that representative government allows people to be represented. Well, there were no colonists in Parliament. And that's kind of the point there. If there are no colonists in Parliament to argue their case against all of those taxes, there's no contract. That the things that they're putting on the colonies there are null and void. They should be abolished, gotten rid of. Point number five, the king violated his agreement with the colonists. The king acted along with Parliament to deprive the colonists of their rights. Therefore, the colonists had the right to withdraw their consent to be governed by the king. The colonists were free to establish their own government. And then finally, what complaints? The Declaration contains a long list of complaints against the British king. For example, the Declaration accuses the king of the following: refusing to approve laws for the necessary for the public good, seeking to destroy the colonial legislatures, Declaratory Act, obstructing justice by refusing to give certain powers to the colonial courts, keeping standing armies in times of peace, Quartering Act, requiring the quartering or housing of British soldiers, Quartering Act, imposing taxes without the consent of the people to be taxed, Sugar Act, cutting off trade between the colonies and all parts of the world, Sugar Act, in some cases, denying the colonists the right to trial by jury. And again, I'm half awake, and I know when there's some specific events that pop up in the Declaration. So we'll be doing this next week, discussing the ideas about good government in your own words. So we're going to pass on reading that. Why did some colonists want to remain British subjects? And this is the awkward big elephant in the room. Not everybody wanted to declare independence. To rebel against the British government was a serious matter. I mean, the Declaration was a form of treason. So anybody who put their name on that document was probably going to get killed. After all, generations of colonists had been loyal to Great Britain. It is understandable then that some people did not support the revolution. The colonists were almost evenly divided into those who supported the revolution, those who did not, and the undecided. The people who remained loyal to the king were called loyalists or Tories. They held deep feelings of loyalty to the home country, and it makes sense. The people that were loyalists are the people now that they don't like change. I don't want to rebel against the king. That's what we've been doing for so long. What are you doing? Yeah, I get it. When people don't want things to change. It's happened before. It'll happen again. Now we just have a word for that. This time, loyalists. Many loyalists were large landowners, wealthy merchants, or officials of the king. They were benefiting, pretty much. They're loyal because they benefit. Why not? Why not? It makes sense. Good for them. Get your paper, boo-boo. The loyalists did not like British taxes or other limits on their freedom any more than the patriots did, but they did not think that breaking away from Britain was the answer to these problems. Some colonial families split apart when the revolution began. Family members chose sides. Those who supported the revolution were called patriots. Those who remained loyal to Britain were known as loyalists. My favorite founder, because he was insane and he was an old guy. He just went off. Benjamin Franklin, clear patriot. He helped write the Declaration of Independence, but his son was an official in Great Britain, loyalist. Split, family split. Many loyalists joined the British Army and fought for the king. Some loyalists moved back to Great Britain while others went to Canada or the West Indies, where all that sugar is coming from. Those loyalists who remained in the colonies had a hard time. Sometimes their property was taken from them. Sometimes they were humiliated or put in jail. Even so, the loyalists as a group suffered less than dissenters in other revolutions. And by dissenters, so if the colonies declare independence, right, and there's people that are sticking around, if a majority of you are going one way and there's still a couple people falling behind, sometimes they get mistreated. Natural thing that happens. Really all depends here. Don't really want to read through this, but it is something to think about because these are just normal human beings. What would you do in this situation? Would you support the revolution or would you remain loyal? And it really all depends on your situation. It is something interesting to think about. No matter what, that lesson 8, basic ideas of the Declaration of Independence, the ideals of good government, arguments for splitting away, specific complaints against the king, and that conclusion. Boy, I am so glad I woke up this morning and read about the Declaration of Independence. I feel so free. then you should too. Darn it, you should too. Let's have a great day. Bye-bye.